So we just,
Literature.
do we have our audit?
Oh, yeah. We have to.
Finance here. But the folks from, audit.
Really?
Okay, we're gonna be on time. My watch is, well, it's a little bit early, but the back clock says that it is after 12:15. So I'd like to call our finance meeting to order. It's Thursday, August 29th. This is Kelly Lessons, Finance Committee Chair for the record. Members Higgins, Jacobs are in the room, and
Holloman, Bellamy, and Wilson.
Holloman, Bellamy, and Wilson are online. So that means that all members of the Finance Committee, Bellamy, Higgins, and myself are here. And also in the room, we have a lot of staff. Could you go around, please, starting with the superintendent?
Jared Bryant, Superintendent.
Aurora Cogerland, Senior Director of Finance.
Andy Ratliff, Chief Financial Officer.
Katie Parrott, Senior Director of Budget. America Sullivan, Executive Assistant.
Sven Gustafson, Chief Academic Officer.
Corey Ace.
Teacher. Devin Roberts, Director of CTE.
Sean Prince, Senior Director of Teaching and Learning, Secondary. Marty Lang, Chief Human Resource Officer.
Great. So we have a pretty full agenda today, but hopefully we can emulate governance and get through it all. The first item is the FY25 audit plan. This is an annual process. We did, as a board on August 16th, receive a memo from the municipality requesting audit plan topics for the 24-25 school year, with a list given by us no later than Monday the 16th. So hopefully our finance team has potential topics that the committee and board members can consider.
Okay, great, thank you. So yeah, we did come up with some ideas for internal audits that we would like to see this year. Background, they can generally complete 3 or 4 audits per year, so we're really kind of limited in how many we can do with just this internal audit from the city. But on our list of ideas we would want to see, or potentially our P cards and addenda, which would be 2 separate audits. We're finishing up the addenda audit for, I guess it would be the 22-23 year. But both P cards and addenda, there's a significant amount of money that flow through those programs, and they're both a little bit on the higher risk side. So we would like to do those. We do the P cards annually, and that's generally been the case every year. The addenda, we haven't done necessarily annually, but it's at least once every couple of years. I'd like to see it done annually just because of the dollars that flow through there. The other ideas we had were cash controls at the school, so to make sure that they're following the proper procedures to intake cash and receive that at the school level. The maintenance and operations, parts and materials controls, so to ensure that whenever someone's taking tools, parts, whatever materials out of the maintenance control room, that they're documenting and following all their policies and procedures properly. So that was one idea we had. Building access controls would be another, so to ensure that the folks who have access to various buildings, whether it's this building, different schools, that if they have the fob access, that all that is standardized and generated, who needs to have access. And then the last one would be on special activity agreements. Similar to addenda, we do have, this is just kind of more temporary employees that are getting these activity agreements in place. Generally, this is like coaching and things, which we're not, the addenda is more our salary employees that get it, and then the activity agreements are for those kind of outside of that. But it is another big pot of money that goes out that we like to check up on every so often.
Those are all great suggestions. I had one question, which is, did we do the maintenance and operations parts controls or something similar a couple of years ago? Or was it transportation? I feel like
we had warehouse inventory controls for the maintenance and operations back in 2020.
Okay.
We also did building access controls back in 2020 as well. We've done student nutrition warehouse and inventory controls in 23. That was the more recent one.
Okay. Any board member thoughts? Yes.
Yeah, I
Okay, guys.
remember, a number of years ago, we used to always do a special audit of the sports and fundings and all these separate accounts they had for different activities because there were so many problems with it. Then they stopped it. A couple of years later, somebody went to jail, I think, over it, because it was pretty bad. Is that something covered in this or not?
Well, yeah, we used to do a separate decentralized student activities audit every year, but
Yeah.
it was probably 7 years ago, or 6 or 7 years ago, we centralized all those accounts. Before, the high schools and middle schools had their own checking accounts. They'd write their own checks, write their own PRs, take the cash, and so we'd audit that separately. Now we require that to go through district accounts. So we have a lot more visibility into what's coming in, and it's also covered under our district-wide audit. It's covered under our P-card audits, addenda. So all the stuff that flows through those accounts is also being audited under these other ones. And I think, like you said, we did have fraud there, and we probably had fraud after we centralized it too, but that was more on the cash collection side versus the receiving or the payments.
The second one, I'm sorry, it's got somebody else first. The second one, it just has to do with charter schools. We've had issues in the past with charter schools where they put money through the PTA and then lease property, and I'm sure you're quite familiar with that one. We've had it going to inappropriate private schools, religious, you name it, and we've had some other expenditures that they weren't following our process. Is that something that should be subject to like a special audit to take a look at that? Because I don't know if it's fully under control or not, but I know it was a serious problem. It's been a history of that.
Yeah, and that's actually, we're really limited on what we can audit on that. Like if there's for instance, like Wilkashula Inc. or whatever, or 515 PTAs, 501c3s that are kind of ancillary to these, but not under the district's control, we can't go in there and audit them. We don't have any really control over those entities to do so.
Yeah, I'm not talking about going in and auditing the PTA. It was the school leasing it through the PTA that was coming in from the church to the PTA and then doubles over the leftover funds from there. That becomes a policy issue of the school district that you're not paying the competitive rate. You're not doing this. You're doing it in a way that artificially inflates it, or that you're spending money for religious, for this activities, or whatever it is that's in violation. So I'm not looking at anything other than the charter actually spending it. But the charter school is subject to all of our policies and procedures.
If they're subletting it through
That's
one
right.
of their agencies.
If
Yeah,
they
we can check
sublet
and
it,
see if they
we
are.
can look at the subletting. We can't go further, but we should be looking at the charter schools. What are they spending money on? Is there an issue, a violation, charter, a constitutional state? Because we took back one charter, but are we looking at the other charters to make sure that if there's a compliance issue that we're addressing it in a constructive way rather than after the fact? So I feel like that to me is just a big area of support for the charter schools, but it's also we're responsible for it. It's a school district school, even though it's going through the charter. Those are school district kids, and we give them the issue of what they want to do with the how they teach them and all that. If they don't have flexibility on spending the money any damn way they want to, excuse me.
Right, I mean, they're subject to our policies.
Yeah, so I would like to see something in regards to some sort of a serious review on that. So let's make sure that we're clean. So it's out there in the press right now anyway on the other issues. So let's clear it up. Let's make sure that we are not in violation of the Constitution and we are in compliance with our policies and procedures.
So looking at how they are spending their funds and also the funds that they're reimbursing to parents as well.
Yeah, because it becomes if we're reimbursing them for a purpose of religious school, then we've got a constitutional issue. So I think we need to look at this in regards to are they in full compliance with ASD policies, but they're not exempt from those policies. We've been through this. And I don't know how strict we are, how good we are about doing it. We kind of had a hands-off approach towards charter schools when I first got on in 2008. The administration's view was if they want to be on their own, they can find their own place to be. And they went in unsafe places. So it was a difficult thing, and money was not being monitored or anything else. I would like to see a control on that, to have a thorough review what those charter schools are spending money on as part of them.
I'm wondering if finance wants to respond, whether that's possible or.
Yeah, I mean, in general, charter schools, their spending is done under these other audits as well, so we do incorporate them in there. But I mean, if you'd like a specific kind of review of, because generally it is the leasing, if you're subletting from, like if Winterberry is subletting from Winterberry Parent Guild, something like that, where the action, and they're leasing it from someone else to make sure they're not, just a pass-through cost is what's going on. I think we can review something like that internally, without the internal auditor, but get purchasing to review those agreements and make sure.
Could that be just a separate topic for a finance committee meeting rather than an actual audit per se?
Yeah, I don't see why not, but if you want the internal auditors to look at it too, I don't know that would be a real time-consuming study for them either.
And we're reimbursing parents for things that may not fall out of there. How are we tracking that? What are we doing? I think that's a good discussion to have, because we had that problem. It went on for a long time when the board should have known, and the administration too, that there were problems. We just didn't want to get into it. And I appreciate the superintendent's, this is wrong, so we fix it. I want to make sure that we fix all of them, is what my concern is. If we've got others out there like this, I'd really like to call it in. You got a principal that's being paid to maintain the yard at the school, in addition contract within that. I remember that one. So there's a lot of duplication of conflicts and the like that were being done. We had one policy advisory committee that wanted to be able to get paid to do the software, and then they would get paid for it, and a lot of transfer fits conflicts of interest. So I view this as a lot of issues, because there's a lot of money out there. And doing this, I mean, are they renting the building that from somebody for the school that they have rented or they own? There's so many openings here for inappropriate expenditures and lack of control.
I wanted to go to Member Jacobs.
Yeah, just a flag, I think you've got the hand raised online too.
Okay, I didn't. Thank you.
Hashtag not a member of the committee, but I have an opinion. I guess my first question is, just for information purposes, we rattled off a really long list of good audit topics. I imagine you're not coming forward saying, let's do all these this year. So what's our cap in terms of what's a good idea? It sounds like we're P-card and addenda were like 2 recommendations. Is it 4?
I think we would probably want to at least propose 4.
Okay.
And then they generally get to 3 or 4 a year.
Okay. With that said, then, if there can only be 3, anytime administration comes and has something related to safety, my inclination is to prioritize that. Building access seems like a really good topic to prioritize as a 3rd one. If we could get to 4, the other thing, hearing Member Higgins talk about charter school expenditures, my understanding and hope is that we're continuing to ensure that we're closely scrutinizing allotment usage as we're reimbursing those. However, I think that topic is going to be relevant when the legislature dabbles back in. And if we were to audit that specifically, that work product might be of relevance for those folks as they dabble in and talk about it. Put that on the radar as something that might actually have additional use beyond our walls. But safety, in my opinion, should be.
Member Bellamy.
Member Bellamy, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I share Member Higgins' concerns with the charter schools. I guess after what we went through last spring, could the administration just share what are the safeguards we've put in place just this last year? Because I think, we didn't call it an audit, and I don't want these families thinking we're just picking at them. But Member Higgins is exactly right. There is opportunity, and it's a lot of money. And so I know we did some internal safeguards to make sure that people were spending appropriately. And could somebody talk about what those safeguards are for charter schools now?
Sure, if I may, Member Bellamy, to clarify, we're talking about correspondence allotments, which could apply to charter schools and in the case of family partnership and alternatives. Right. So one of the bigger adjustments we made was we sent a memorandum to all families letting them know that it's not permissible for a full-time private school student to receive an allotment, period. So that clarified a lot of the misuse that was occurring in those schools. And then there might have been some other provisions we submitted to them in a memorandum, looking at Mr. Gustafson, you
Yeah.
recall.
There was well, I'd have to go look back at the memorandum, but there was something in there regarding part-time students.
Right, so we clarified the use of
Sectarian.
taking courses versus subsidizing tuition. So a number of ways to ensure that we're fulfilling the spirit of the Constitution. And all of that with a giant caveat that a lot of this is still being litigated at the court levels. There are some things that are inappropriate but not unlawful. So for example, there was a recent article on the purchase of greenhouses and grow machines with allotments. That's an example of something that is inappropriate but currently lawful. So there's certainly some gray area that districts statewide need to grapple with in conjunction with the courts.
So to dial in and respect time, I had before, remember, Jacob spoke, I too had put stars beside the P card, the agenda, and the building access controls as the ones that I personally would like to see prioritized. I think if there, so I guess my first round of questioning is, can I get a thumbs up from finance committee members, Higgins, Bellamy, and I guess me, and Holloman is ex officio, that those three should be prioritized. So member Bellamy?
Yes,
Those three? Great.
yes, I agree.
I support it, I just with the caveat that we're gonna look at the other aspect of it separately from that, but I like those three.
Okay. And then I think if there is discretion, I mean, if we can encompass a fourth, the question of correspondence, allotment usage, how, whether or not charter schools are in compliance.
I'd say the allotment would be probably a lot more in depth than like checking to see if the charter schools have a relationship with their kind of outside governing entity and what that is. That would be a lot more simple than going in for the allotments. And from a transactional standpoint, when a parent submits for reimbursement, the general process is it's reviewed by the teacher, I believe, goes through the school with their business managers, their principals reviewing the spending, and then it comes to accounting where we're matching up the invoice and the payment method to the reimbursement to the parent. Anything that looks maybe a little bit suspicious or like shouldn't be based on the memos, the guidelines we wrote, we'll send that up to the Director of Alternative Education for them to review as well.
Just to reiterate, why I think this might be a good idea is we just, Superintendent Bryant reference that we put controls in place.
Yeah.
One of the great things about an audit is it checks the efficacy of control. So I understand it's time intensive, but it also could have use in Juneau while they're contemplating a law that has a 1-year sunset on it, even if it's signed.
I think it's a great board addition to, I think, a strong list from the administration. So I would be supportive of adding a correspondence allotment usage audit to that list. So we're prioritizing student learning and we're prioritizing, efficient use of our funds and we're prioritizing student safety. And I think those three values are really important.
It is strictly correspondence. I mean, what for sure the problem we had there was not correspondence. That was an actual school. And then it becomes an issue where you're following your purchasing policies. If they're buying a snowmobile, what's our policy there? And if it's not working, we need to know that. So we could look at that being a change. So I guess I see it not limited strictly to correspondence, but I see it's the charter schools because they're falling outside that site of
I would
oversight.
propose that maybe we take that as a really great discussion topic for another finance committee meeting. Great, okay, so we have our 4 topics.
P cards, agenda, building access controls, and correspondent allotments.
Yes, great, terrific.
Good.
Okay, thank you. Item number 2 on the agenda is FY24 budget transfers. And I think that this was put onto the agenda as or follow up as needed from our recent board meeting. So
Sure. So really the only one that we have for FY24 at the board's level would be the student nutrition for the shelf-stable meals, and then unpaid meal balances where the federal funds cannot cover those items.
And that'll be an action item at our upcoming meeting.
Yes, that'll be action item, and then we do have some smaller things we're gonna do internal that we're still processing as we're trying to close out last year, like the mobile metal detectors. We need some money for like chemistry lab or chemical disposal. There's a couple other small AEDs for high schools, interpreter services, things we're trying to cover internally versus making more substantial budget revisions later on. But
Could you speak to mobile metal detectors? That's not something that I had heard of before.
So, so going back to the budget revision,
Yeah.
we requested staff members for the use of mitigating the use of weapons in schools, for example.
Okay, was this presented during the work session that was really hard to hear?
Possibly.
Okay,
Yes.
that would explain why.
But essentially, so we're requesting 3 additional staff members
Yes,
for the
okay.
purpose of standing up mobile metal detectors, which is essentially the best of all worlds because it's very invasive and resource intensive to have metal detectors full-time at all buildings. You need a security personnel for everyone. With a mobile metal detector, we're able to only hire a couple of staff members, but to do routine weapons audit. So we can stand up a mobile metal detector site at a high school and essentially change behavior because students in the community is aware that on any given day, a school can be audited for weapons in schools.
That's a
Really?
sobering conversation.
yeah, so we're cleaning up FY '24 now. We're hoping to close out our general fund next week. And then probably the next finance committee will come back with some preliminary data on how we end the year.
Great. Any additional questions from board members? Great. Item number 3 is FY '25 budget revisions.
So we did do the budget revision. I don't believe we have anything major in the works aside from that's needed, so just kind of open that one up for discussion. if you will.
Member Jacobs.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I was alerted yesterday that we had a line item for school-based mental health supports performed by outside entities, I think like Providence and maybe VOA and others in our FY '24 budget that may not exist in our FY '25 budget. And I want to say maybe it was between 100 and 200,000, maybe like 180,000. I'm checking to see if that sounds right and if that was intentional, that it was 1 year, or if that was part of our budget reduction package that the board approved. If that can't be answered on the fly, I understand.
It was part of the budget reduction conversation. But I'm not 100% sure how those services were going to be provided. It went down, their contracted services within the mental health and student supports went down from about a little under $1.5 million to about 230,000. A lot of it was like the VOA, United Way, those things we planned to contract, we never actually did, I don't believe. But I don't have specifics on why or how the services.
What I think I had understood, just as a follow-up note, was that there was a plan to expand the school served from 5 to 7, and that had to go away as part of the budget revision process. And we restored some of the most harmful cuts. If administration thinks that that's one of the cuts that we didn't reverse that we should, I know Member Wilson and I specifically have been advocates for mental health supports where we can get them. And they're apparently our community providers that are standing by and willing to do that work. To me, the investment seems worth it, but we haven't discussed it yet. And I admit I did not track. It was part of the cuts that didn't get reversed. So I'm throwing that there for conversation now because I just became aware.
We can connect with Dr. Dukes and get a more detailed answer for you on that too.
Could we get sort of a response, maybe in Board Connect?
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks.
Great. Any comments online, questions? Okay, moving right along to item 4. I have requested item 4, which is listed as FY '22 to FY '25 Academies of Anchorage expenses and funding sources. And really, in part, this is part of a reflection on the amendment that the board passed in June and which read that the board deeply appreciates the time and resources invested in and by ASD to bring the AOA master plan proposal forward, but I don't know that the board has seen what those resources are. So this is just an attempt at, in line with board policy 3000, which we spoke about earlier in governance, to just better understand sort of the bigger picture.
Sure. So we put together a quick spreadsheet, and want to caveat this with these numbers are not going to be 100% accurate, because if you start looking at the list, like the general fund CCL, while most of that was tied to the academies, they're doing other work as well. They're doing other CTE work, college life, SAT, whatever it might be. We put that money in there as kind of a direct cost, and then like the general fund CTE, that was a direct cost of Ford NGL for FY23, and then the art money and the Fostering Diverse Schools grant was also directly related to academies. But I did put the other CTE funding sources on there, because some of that is being for Academies of Anchorage, like the general fund, CTE department, and the Carl Perkins grant. That money is going to be spent on CTE either way. As we wanted to list the total amount, so this is going to a lot of different programs, not necessarily academies, but we don't have a good way of breaking out the amount that was actually dedicated to academies versus other CTE programs. I wanted to disclose the total amounts there. Similar, like everyone in this room spent a lot of time on academies either, but very difficult for us to break out our time and effort of everyone that put in work to help make these academies happen.
Okay. Member Hagan?
Yeah, the big issue here wasn't necessarily to me from talking to principals, isn't the dollars, it's the staffing. If we're going to be able to do this, then you can spend money in it, but you don't have teachers, you can hire short of them anyway. And then how are they going to manage with it? There's a high level of stress out there with some principals because of that. So these monies assume that we're going to be able to spend some of that money on teachers, and it's going to be dedicated for that as well. And if we're going to be short, this isn't going to help us hire more people. We're going to be filling all the jobs we got, right?
Member Higgins, if I could, so I agree that there are nationwide staffing shortages for sure, and even today we have teacher vacancies. But again, the long-range vision for the Academies of Anchorage is to have an additional 4 pathways for educators. So I'd love to stand up educator pathways so that we can produce 50 plus new teachers every year, and we're not going to get there unless we invest for the initial 4 years to stand up those education academies. So we, just like all the other CEOs of other organizations, are in dire need of labor, and that's where this opportunity was born out of, and we're direct beneficiaries if we can just successfully implement or grow our own program.
And I'm not just, I'm supportive of the academy concept, that's not an issue, it's just a matter of if you've got 150 teachers short and you say, oh, we want to add another 25, well, you're going to be 175 teachers short. And does it reflect in here financially then that you're really not adding staff because you can't find it?
Right, and this is only I've looked through the current fiscal year, and I would say like the 25 amounts are just what we have budgeted. We don't know that, we don't have the actual spending yet, but it doesn't, to your point, project out to 26 where those decisions are going to be made essentially.
So thank you for preparing this. Could you help me understand Carl Perkins grants? I mean, I assume that they existed before the Academies of Anchorage initiative.
Yep.
We are still receiving them, but could you just help me understand? I mean, are these funds that are being diverted or just being
I cannot
used
help
in
you,
a
but
complementary way?
Evan's here.
So Carl Perkins funding is a federal pass-through grant that comes through the states and then are distributed to local education agencies. So we've historically been receiving Carl Perkins funds for almost as long as the program has been around. So it goes to fund our current existing program. We do have a program at middle school and high school that's all been supported with Carl Perkins funds. It has a number of strings attached in terms of what it can be utilized for. Typically it's utilized to support professional development for CTE teachers. It's used to support supply and materials and equipment necessary because CTE is supply. You know, you consume supplies as a result of CTE courses that are a little less typical in some of the academic areas. Do you have further questions?
So essentially, it is CTE oriented, always has been and continues to be applied towards improving the CTE program, though it is now grouped under sort of the academies.
Not necessarily, but some of them, I mean, the academies have a lot of CTE work just embedded in, and that's kind of the nature of it. So there is going to be overlap within those funding sources.
I think there's a hand, is it Member Bellamy online?
President
Oh,
Holloman.
President Holloman, okay.
Thank you. This kind of goes back to the discussion previously about staffing. And, you know, we have limited CTE positions in our high schools right now, but they do have programs in place. And so my question is, are those programs going to continue? Are those classes going to continue? And if they are, I assume they're going to continue to be staffed by the people we have in place. Does that mean for the pathways, we're in essence bringing in brand new CTE teachers to staff those pathways? As I realize the pathways build kind of slowly, but by the second year in particular, it seems like there'd be quite a bit of demand for staff in order to make them work. Just kind of wondering about the logistics of the specific people that will be in place and what happens to the programs we have in place right now.
Sure. So yeah, currently we do have existing CT teachers. Many CT teachers are part-time or split between academic subjects and CTE. So there is capacity for them to increase the amount of CT program that they're offering at those schools. The intention is the vast majority of our existing programs, which are pretty successful CT programs, are going to form or be folded in or integrated with all of the pathways that we have. So we when the career-focused academics tactic team did their work, along with partnering with the sites, the comprehensive high schools, the schools and that tactic team took all of that into account in order to make sure to preserve program and build upon existing program. But the end goal is to have more students that are concentrators, because it's the concentrators where we see those are students that have taken 2 years in the same cluster. That's where we see the big benefits coming from CTE. And so we anticipate that we will have to bring more CTE teachers in as the program rolls out because of the added pathways.
Okay, so to sort of rephrase what I think I heard is that as the program builds, the number of staffing in CTE will need to increase to support the goal of graduating more concentrators.
Yes.
Okay. Does that answer your question, President Holloman?
Yes, thank you.
Corey,
Yeah, kind of curious. We know which pathways and academies we've adopted that. We started to put a list together of who we need to hire. Do we have a hire list yet?
Okay. Member Jacobs?
Yeah, is there any update you can share about grant funding opportunities and where we are in that process? What I think I recall is there was a grant we were invited to apply for in addition to the current grant that we already received for roughly $20 million. And I'm curious if there's any update on that and what the time frame is when we might be noticed of an award, whether we get it or not.
I can answer that question. The Magnet Schools grant is the one that we've talked about previously, and the window for applying opens this spring. If we were awarded that funding source, we wouldn't find out until September, October of 25. So we're about a year away from knowing if we have secured that funding or not. It is our intent as soon as the window opens to apply.
Can I ask a follow-up? Sure. If we're awarded that grant, is it feasible to offload some or all of the Academies of Anchorage cost onto that additional grant?
I think there's a significant portion that could be offloaded. I mean, not knowing all the particulars quite yet, and what the stipulations of the grant would limit us to, we could spend a significant portion of that grant.
Okay, thank you.
I appreciate the question. I was actually on the Office of Secondary Education, oese.ed.gov website yesterday, and noticed that there was like maybe a May 2024 magnet school grantee list, and I didn't see ASD on it, but it sounds like we were not aiming for May of 2024, but shooting for something further afield.
Yeah. They did actually invite us to apply for that grant, but it was late April when we found out that they would like us to apply. It literally gave us like 2 weeks to do the work, and writing a grant of that size is really a lot of work, and substantial research has to go into it. So we just didn't have the capacity at that time to get our application in for that spring.
Okay, so we have not been rejected. We
Right.
simply haven't initiated the application.
Yeah,
Itself, yeah.
that's correct.
Okay, that's helpful to know. Additional questions? Oh, yeah.
I was just going to note one more thing for the conversation around staffing. This is the second year in a row we have had a significant number of vacancies at the beginning of the year, but again, for the second year, very few of those are at the high school level. That is one area where we have not had the same staffing challenges that we've had at elementary and in special ed. And also around the academies work, I would note too, that especially when it comes to hiring of CTE teachers, this actually opens up some additional pathways for us. The Type M certification through the state allows us to honor people's industry experience and credential them to come in and be teachers. And then we also have the emergency certificate pathway through the state, where somebody, based on their 4-year bachelor's degree, can be credentialed as long as they're concurrently enrolled in the teacher preparation program. And so we see that as a pathway that's a lot more useful at high school, because people have the knowledge and experience through their university training, and then we just need to teach them how to be good teachers in the classroom and work with kids. That pathway has proven less useful at elementary because people don't often have a background in reading and early literacy like we do at high school.
I know it's been an issue that you take elementary class, but you can't get math credit, you can't do this, I mean, back and forth. Does this process allow that accreditation, credits be given in that way?
There were stricter standards when we were subject to highly qualified designations under NCLB. Those have been removed, so as long as somebody has the proper endorsements, it's less of a barrier than it used to be.
Yeah.
I would add that we do have a current program, the CTE program in the district, that provides for sometimes a combination of general credit and academic credit already in existence.
Good, thank you.
Yeah. One other note about staffing around academies is that it's a phase-in model. So in terms of the staffing of the academies program, that as students move through the academies, as they move up grade levels, there will be a recruiting effort each year as that program grows. It allows us time to recruit the kind of numbers that we would need when the program's fully active across the high schools. So that's just a note to think about too.
This makes a big difference on how many classes we're doing.
Yes.
Because that's where the real question of the staffing issue will be. If you go from 6 classes to 8 or something like that, then you gotta have teachers for that. And that's gonna be the real crisis to me. I don't know how we're gonna get past that right now. Just, if you have a goal, I like it, but from a practical standpoint, it seems to be a nightmare.
I had a question. Over the summer, I was looking at some of the other Fort NGL communities, and I'm maybe slaughtering the name, but maybe there's a Fort NGL Shakopee. Does that sound familiar? Shakopee-ish.
Shakopee.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
yeah.
Anyways, it sounds like something from the Music Man. But my question, I noticed that in their academy system, and I'm paraphrasing here, for each, it's like one high school, and for each of their 5 or 6 academies, business partners are putting forward about $300,000 for each academy, which is a lot of, local contributions towards one high school. We have 8 comprehensive high schools. what do we know about the contributions that any of our community partners may be ready and eager and willing to do?
Dr. Wright, would you like to do that?
You can share something.
Sure. We have started to enter some of those conversations with business partners. But they haven't signed on the dotted line, so I don't really want to put their name forward on record quite yet. We're working through a process. Marty is helping share the resource management tactic team where we have a process for our business community to do those types of contributions. We have 3 large name businesses right now that we're engaged with in that conversation, and they are interested in potential financial contributions that could be substantial, like the member lessons. So that's in addition to volunteering in our schools and giving their time and talent to our kids. So so I do think that there is a lot of potential there, and these are businesses that have approached us. We haven't even approached them, and so we haven't even had the opportunity quite yet to really go out there and solicit essentially our community for that support. So.
But can I add about we have had a company come and donate 2 full trailers of construction grade material for their construction classes because they heard about the academies and are excited about the academies. And that's happened just recently.
Well, I think, all contributions are welcome, but I don't, maybe I've read too many children's stories, but I do think about the story of the little red hen. And everybody wants to eat the bread, but not everybody wants to help the little red hen, grow the wheat, sow the wheat. So I'm eager to hear who else wants to grow the wheat for the ASC.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One last question on the magnet grant. I think it was thinking back, and I guess I'm curious, and please feel free to be transparent. There's no one watching, and we're only streaming live to YouTube. There was significant discussion at the board level regarding the academies, and I can't help but wonder if the uncertainty regarding the board's perspective on the academies played a role in our application, even with the short notice of 2 weeks. Did that have any role in our choosing not to apply, or was it truly just the time frame?
I would say that all of it contributes. It's a very small team. It's expanding as we grow the program. I think the board's well aware of there's only so many employees in the district to do the work. And so it's always a challenge depending on what's on our plate. But grant writing is a timely, a time investment. But the rewards for those larger grants are very substantial and we do a lot for our district, so it's worth it in my opinion. But we do have to have the time to do the research while we're still maintaining kind of the daily tests.
Sure. Yeah, I'm tracking that when someone tells you to apply for a grant, it's a really, really good sign, right?
Yeah.
So,
the Department of Education is really pleased with the work that we've done on the current grant. They see just in terms of comparison to other communities that have received that grant, they're really impressed with just our ability to kind of follow through our community support. Our reporting and collaboration with the Department of Education as well is a big part of that as well. So typically when you work with the Department of Education, if you have that really great kind of reciprocal relationship, you're more likely to receive future grants, whether it's a magnet school grant or something else. And so I think nurturing that relationship is really important. And so we really try to do that.
Yeah, I guess the last comment I would make, and part of the reason why I asked, is if, as a governing board, we don't always explicitly invite feedback, but if while we are scrutinizing with good reason, large initiatives, if our actions are having a potential negative impact explicitly regarding potential threads of funding, please let me know at the very least. 107 is begging you to let us know. But I would hope I'm sure everyone feels the same way. So please give us a heads up because we need to get creative as to how we fund these large initiatives, given the failure at the state level right now.
Can I just clarify one thing that Kirsten said? Because last year when this was coming out in the spring, our grants department had one person in the department, and now it's grown. So now we have another person. So when she said it's growing, it's that we finally got another person in the grants department.
Well, and that's the other kind of feedback, I guess. I mean, if we need to secure contracted outside help to seize an opportunity, that's an investment with a huge ROI potentially. So, I mean, I would hope
We should have had that conversation.
Yeah, so I would hope yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think if the board's comfortable with that conversation, it would be a worthy one. Substantial millions of dollars of grants could be had if we had the kind of resources to really dedicate.
I feel like we're all little friends at this point. So yeah,
Yeah.
let's have those tough calls. Thanks.
I wanted to ask about the FBS grant. We're sort of nearing the end of what I understand to be the first year, which sort of maybe the first year is September 30th. Did I get that right? Do you folks feel comfortable reflecting on how that grant has been spent? I mean, right here, there's a line item for FY24, but if you could, I would just be open and interested in understanding kind of where the money has gone, maybe what have we learned from how it's been used.
I can start, maybe Devin, you want to chime in as well? I think that we have accomplished a lot with that funding in the past year. We were able to launch academy coaches at each of our high schools. That those 8 individuals spent a significant amount of time with the Academies and Anchorage team doing the community outreach, the research needed to kind of stand things up. We have done a significant amount of professional development with those funds as well. Another huge piece of that grant is eliminating student fees as a barrier. So we've done a significant amount of paying for different fees, like there are class fees that students typically pay for certain classes in the system. We've been able to waive those and use the grant funds for those materials instead, so students are not eliminating classes from their schedule because they don't want to pay the course fee or are unable to. Even though we have a waiver process, it gets a little tricky. We've been able to pay for some like equipment as well in our CTE classrooms, and we've been able to, I'm just trying to think, other things that you can think of, Devin.
Well, it was a significant amount. We were able to refresh more computer labs than we had anticipated, which was one of the big costs in CTE. A lot of programming, a lot of planned program are going to require those kinds of things, and so that was a great help in terms of specific equipment. School sites got certain amounts of money to customize around equipment purchases for their specific CTE program, so that kind of gets into the weeds a little bit. Currently, there's some discussion going on. There's a couple $100,000 in a capital equipment budget, and we're looking at ways of supporting or putting into place. That's for equipment that's not just a computer, but something that's over $5,000. But there's some of that is being discussed and will be utilized as well.
Are there remaining funds from year one of this grant? And are there intentions for how it will be expended?
There are some. The intent is to spend down, to be a good, steward of the grant, is to spend it down as you have planned and meet your plan requirements, which is happening. But there's likely to be some, not a whole lot of money that will be left over, and that generally in this particular grant is allowable to be allocated to the next year, allocated for the next year. So my understanding is that anything that is remaining is
so there's not a mad rush to spend things willy-nilly by the end of September.
No, that's something that we've tried to really be cognizant of, to use it for real purposes as opposed to at the end of the fiscal year, just have a mad dash to spend money. The needs that Devin's talking about spending down are legitimate equipment and supply needs at schools, and so they're just doing that before the deadline, essentially of September 30th.
Can any remaining funds be allocated towards, when we look at where students are failing to graduate because they have failing grades in core courses leading with math, language arts, social studies, and science. and that's not where these funds are going. But to what extent, if possible, can remaining funds be allocated towards, I don't know, agenda to support core coursework needs? Like high value tutoring, for example, should those people be available? I mean, is that in the realm of possibility, or is that?
I think there is some leeway in order to be able to do like agenda with this particular grant. Some things in terms of professional development, I would go back to. We didn't get into weeds on that, but we just conducted interdisciplinary teaming with academic teachers. Like all freshman teams received professional development, and that meant math teachers, science teachers, English teachers, and the freshman academic exploration teachers. And then some of the money is set to be spent on project-based learning pedagogy for teachers that aren't just CT teachers, but are for teachers in the academic areas as well. But I would feel more comfortable probably talking to Cindy about specifically about whether funds could, she's the manager for that grant, about whether it could be utilized for tutoring.
Oh, sorry.
Member Wilson.
Thank you. Member Wilson, please go ahead.
Yes, so I've had my hand up for a little while, so I'm going back a little bit. The discussion about partners, I wanted to point out and give credit to our community conveners. And Kristen, you'd probably be a perfect person to talk about this. For example, United Way, and the staff person that they hired to support the academies. Anyways, I wanted to have somebody talk a little bit about what our community conveners have been contributing.
Sure, yeah, I can certainly talk about that. Most of the like I would say donation, if you will, that we've gotten from our community partners so far, or community convener, is through staffing to support this work on the community side. So the position at United Way is directly tied to this ASC initiative and work and partnership. So there's a full-time staff position that United Way is providing. So that's upwards of $100,000 or more with the benefits that they've contributed to help us. UAA has a position as well that's working with us on dual credit programs. It's not dedicated entirely to ASD. It's dedicated to K-12 partnerships across the state, but we're one of their biggest users, and so a lot of that staff members' time is dedicated to us as well. So those are two examples. Many of the other conveners have dedicated just a lot of staff time to help us plan and develop. So they're not, requiring people to take time off to participate. They're paying their salary while they're volunteering their time with us as well. So there is significant investment. It's just not quite in the dollar amount at this point. Oh yeah, and then good point. The Career Expo, we did get a donation from the municipality of the Denina Center, and so they are not charging us for that facility for the Career Expo associated with Freshman Fair, and that's a significant dollar amount, over $10,000. So.
Great. I'm going to pivot to item. Thank you all very much. Item number 5 on our agenda, which was moved to finance from our most recent meeting regarding board travel. To recap, there was a question about whether board travel will be allowed, given the board's intention to, in the budget process, to not allocate funds. Are there any board member comments at this time or suggestions for the committee's consideration? Yeah, Greg.
And I've had a chance to talk a little bit of finance too. One time that the issue becomes there was a big pot of funds out there within it, but it was brought up by Bellamy in regards to should we allocate, should we be upfront and do so. I've asked to work on providing a document that I'll provide to the president to ask to put it on the agenda so that we'll have a dedication amount of money. I've had to tell you, just the history of attending these things has been a big issue for school board members. I remember one where it focused on reducing special education costs and what Arkansas was doing. I remember the issues about curriculum and how they were changing things. Kentucky was doing a 5-year retraining for every teacher. So much out there reports. They've got a big study on effectiveness of school boards and correlations of how they're doing things. All of that type of information has been really valuable. We've been attended with, in the past, with National School Board Associations, with superintendent, because the issues are out there. The National Academy of Science presentations with tablets for $100 in classes for $25, which is it's really fascinating within that. So what I've done is, rather than try to deal with it here, is to go ahead and get a memo together with showing the funding, the assistance. I'll give that to the president and request that it be included in the for the board for its consideration. There is a conference coming up in October. I think it's late October with CUBE, which is for the large urban school districts. We've never attended one of those. And they broke off somewhat a few years ago when it got to political issues with COVID or anything else, and the school board and NSBA made some comments. I think that contributed to them being more active within it. But regardless, what they're accomplishing and what the direction they're taking, AI for one, but all of the issues in the way of funding, I think is important. So, yeah, I'll go ahead and generate a document working with finance in regards to that. I hope, as I mentioned before, that the superintendent will actually consider both of those conferences because it was appropriate staff, because I think it's that valuable. And the presentation, like the last school board, NSC conference I attended, we had one of the two people that created AI there and did a presentation. That's tremendously valuable, given an indication of what direction we're going in and what we should do. So I've always felt like this is important, particularly for new school board members that have never attended a conference. This becomes a real eye-opener on the NSBA and even the Council of Great City Schools. I'm not a big proponent of that, but what they provide in the way of activities and presentations and discussions, both in the session and out of the session, is really important. So I'll go ahead and do it, generate it that way rather than try to present something and doing the finance committee. And it's a relatively small amount, so I got to tell you, given the budgets and everything else we've got going on, this is a very small amount.
Well, as one member of the finance committee, I'm happy to defer the conversation until moving forward.
Madam Chair.
Yes, please, Member Bellamy.
Thank you. So it sounds like the superintendent has set aside some travel funds. And so there are some of us who are not going to, won't need assistance traveling. But there are others that might need assistance traveling. So it sounds like we're not a zero-sum balance. And right now, the superintendent has some funds that could be shared. So I would recommend that those board members who want to do, who are just follow our process, alert the president. You get one trip outside of the state, according to our bylaws, and you can have, usually it's whatever is internal inside the state. We pretty much can go to whatever we'd like. But I think if we do have limited funds, everybody can't do everything they want to do, but maybe for those who need assistance to travel, for information purposes, then let the president know, and the president will check with the superintendent. If there's funding, then there's funding, or maybe it's partial, I don't know, but they'll have to work it out. But I don't know that we can all 7 of us can travel full carte blanche like we have in the past. My travel, at least for this year, 24-25, is going to be covered by the state association, or I just pay for it out of pocket. So, but each board member is in a different circumstance. So there appears to be a little pot of money. Work with the president and the superintendent to see what, once they've decided what amount is needed for their for the staff, if there is leftover for the board, or however you want to see that, that's what I'd recommend. Thank you.
Right, so to reflect on what I hear, and then I see two hands, Member Bellamy reminds us that we do have a process that perhaps, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but I hope not, that the president does have some discretion in approving that travel, and that would be an appropriate request that a board member would make of the board president. It's supposed to be at the same time, but I'm going to go to Member Jacobs first.
So I agree with Member Bellamy that there is a process. The board on record agreed to not utilize travel funds this fiscal year. That is a permanent record of part of one of our meetings. So that process, in line with that intent, would not be usable absent the board, in my opinion, absent the board making another decision. I really putting admin in a difficult spot. So I feel like we need to provide clear direction either way to change course on record, since we made that decision on record. So until such a time as we agree as a body, or at least the majority of the agree that we want to start utilizing funds, again, I would encourage us not to utilize that process because we said we wouldn't.
So maybe your suggestion is don't use the process that exists out of deference to our agreeing during the budget conversation. But this could be an opportunity for Member Higgins to bring forth an agenda item where there would be a formal discussion.
Right, and that could look like utilizing the current line item with it could approve travel at the same level of scrutiny that the superintendent's doing for staff. It could look like a specific line item. For me, it makes sense to kind of do it as needed allocation versus guaranteeing that a certain amount of travel will be needed, but that's for whoever wants to write that. I'll say that the other option, of course, is to make sure that we're utilizing all available resources to avoid traveling. It looks like, I was looking up the CUBE conference, looks like the only way to go is to go flying to Las Vegas in person. I wish they had a digital option. It's unfortunate. Maybe they would send us the slide decks where we could get that information, since we certainly give them, at least the NSBA, indirectly over the years and over funding. But just getting creative too might be a solution. At the very least, I would hope we're sending one person to a conference if the board chooses to approve travel. I would hope we're not sending multiple representatives. Thanks.
Member Higgins, and then
President.
and President Holman. Okay, and then we're going to call time after that.
The only reason why I was proposing this is because of Bellamy's comments last time that because we didn't fund it, we need to go through this process. Finance didn't have a problem. There's a big fund pot for all of ASU travel, so it's easy to do that. I think the board took a position, we didn't add it in the budget, but we didn't prohibit travel. So I don't mind putting together a proposal to do it so that we're transparent, if that's a concern. I also think this is not wasteful travel, this is important. I agree with you of not making this so that everybody's out there traveling. We've got certain places we need to go. But one person going and making sure that the superintendent and any appropriate staff goes with it is to me more important, because I do think this would be very beneficial to have both parties, both the administration and the board, knowledgeable of what's being done.
Member Holloman, President Holloman.
Yes, I'm just going to say that I would like some explicit guidance from the board. Touching on what Member Jacobs said, we appear to zero it out, but if we keep the same guidelines in place and we continue to spend the money, I don't feel like that's adhering to what the board indicated. It's certainly being kind of confusing to the public. And it does put us in the position of where board members are tapping travel money that is set aside for staff purposes. And so the question would be, does someone request it from the superintendent or from me? And what's the criteria that we use to say yes or no? The criteria we had before was quite clear, and we had enough money to cover that. And of course, that would always encourage people, if they can't afford to just travel on their own or handle things on their own, to do that, because the dollars we don't spend, I'm hoping, find their way into the classroom. But I would like for the board to state what they intend. Otherwise, I don't have a whole lot of basis when someone says, hey, I see this, I think it'd be worth it. So can I go? I just don't have a lot of basis to say yes or no, or balance that against what staff may need to do. So I appreciate that Member Higgins will draw something up, and I think the board needs to be clear in what our guidelines are.
Thank you for that reflection. It sounds like perhaps no expenditures should be authorized before the board has a vote on a proposed agenda item.
Trying to document this time, so hopefully maybe at the next school board meeting, if not, then the one after that, we'll have it on the agenda.
That sounds like a great plan. All right, we are a few minutes over. Apologize for that, and we'll take a motion to adjourn.
To adjourn.
Second. Thank you.